Gman School of Learning. Brought to you by PEMDAS. Parentheses, exponents, multiplication, division, addition, and subtraction. Now back to your program.
Good morning, Mr. G.
Good morning. Take a seat, student. We're gonna learn 6 algebraic equations.
Aww.
Take a seat. Right there's the seat. Good.
Oh,
Now we're gonna look up on this board and we're gonna learn how to do one-step equations and inverse operations. Now I'm gonna teach you how to do inverse operations and a one-step equation. Now, to do a one-step equation, you first have to know how to do inverse operations. Now, what inverse operations is doing the opposite of what's happening to the x, and when you do something on one side, you do to the other. So, to figure out this simple one-step equation 5x equals 10, you have to divide by 5, because the opposite of multiplication is division, because x is being multiplied by 5. And when you divide by 5, you get x alone, and that's what you're supposed to do. And to solve an equation, you have to get x by itself, and x equals 2. Now, kid, this is how you do a one-step in inverse operations. Any questions? None?
nope.
What do you think about inverse operations? Do you
I
think
think they're awesome.
that's good news? Now we're going to do two-step equations.
No.
Two-step equations. 4x minus 4 equals 8 is the example I put up there. To solve this, you have to use inverse operations. So, you will have to add 4 because you're subtracting 4. Now you get 4x equals 12. But remember, you have to get the x by itself. So, now you have to divide by 4 because x is being multiplied by 4. And now the x is by itself, and you get 3 left. So your answer is x equals 3. And that, my sir, is a two-step equation. Do you,
Is there anything else?
we still have 4 more equations to go. Next is the multi-step equation. Get back to your seat. I know it's crazy, but there's a lot of rules in algebra. Now, let's
Oh,
get to multi-step equations. Now, to solve multi-step equations, this example I put up here, 5 parentheses 2x plus 4 parentheses equals 30, you have to do a new rule called distributive properties. When a number is between parentheses, when a number is in front of a parentheses, so 5 times 2x plus 4, you have to distribute by multiplying 5 to 2x and 4. So now you get 10x plus 20 equals 30. Now you can just do normal inverse operations. Subtract 20 like a normal because 20 is being added to 10x. Now you have 10x equals 10. Divide by 10. And now you just get x equals 1. And the x is by itself, so that is your answer. So in multi-step, distributing numbers is a pretty hard thing to do. Do you think it's hard?
well, yeah, it looks pretty tough.
Well, just remember that it's pretty simple if you know multiplication. Now we have 3 more to
Yay!
go. We have to do
Nah.
absolute value inequalities and absolute value equations. Absolute value equations are up next. Now, to do an absolute value equation, these are pretty hard to do. What absolute value is the distance from 0. So there's almost always 2 answers for an absolute value equation. So 3 times the absolute value of 2x plus 3 equals 21. Unlike a multi-step equation where you distribute, you cannot distribute in an absolute value equation. You have to think of the absolute value as an x or something like that. So, you would have to divide by 3 to get the absolute value by itself. Now, you get the absolute value of 2x plus 3 equals 7. Now, the new thing you have to do with absolute values is you draw 2 equations, one with a negative answer and one with a positive, because the absolute value of negative 7 is 7, because negative 7 is 7 spaces away from 0. So now you just do inverse operations like normal. So you subtract 3 because 3 is being added to 2x on both sides, well, both equations. Now you get 2 different answers. 2x equals 4, then 2x equals negative 10. Don't worry, because this is normal, because you get a completely different answer when it's negative and positive. Now you divide by 2. 2x equals 4, because x is being multiplied by 2. Now the x is by itself on both equations, and you get x equals 2 and x equals negative 5. And that is how you do an absolute value equation. And the reason why I chose to do a harder absolute value equation, because lots of people think you distribute when you're in this situation, but you don't. You have to get the absolute value by itself. Now that, my sir, is an absolute value equation. Do you have any questions?
Yeah. Why do we have to do 2 equations?
Well, because an absolute value is the distance from 0. And when you do an absolute value, there's almost always 2 answers. Because absolute value of a negative number is the positive. So, basically, the absolute value of negative 7 is 7. So, the answer can be 2 different numbers. Now,
Oh,
it's
I see.
time for absolute value inequalities. These ones are a bit tricky.
Ah,
Calm down, we have one more after this one. Oops.
yay.
Now, it's time for absolute value inequalities. Absolute value of 3x plus 6 is greater than 12. So, when you write out your equation, there the inequality signs, if they are the and, you graph them a little bit different, and if they're like that, you graph 2 different graphs, because an or and an and. But in this situation, it's an or. So, since the absolute value is by itself, you can just draw your 2 equations, but when you draw your second equation, you have to remember to switch the sign and turn the answer negative. Second equation, you do 2 things. Flip the sign, and you have to make the answer negative. Now, you subtract 6 like inverse operations. Now you get 3x is greater than 12, and 3x is less than negative 18. You divide by 3, because x is being multiplied by 3. Now you get 2 different answers. X is greater than 4, and x is less than negative 6. And like I said, the reason this is an and an or, we have to graph them with interval notation. When it's an or, you do 2, and when it's an and, you just do 1. And for interval notation, when you do a paren, the number you cannot use, like infinity, or when it's a just no equal then under the inequality sign. And then when you use a bracket, it is a usable number, and that can only be used when it's an equal than, or less than, or greater than, or equal to, or greater than number. So to graph these two, it would be paren 4, comma, infinity, because x is greater than 4. Any number past 4 can be used for x. And then, for the other one, is paren negative infinity, and then negative 6. So x is less than negative 6. So any number after negative 6, well, before negative 6, can be used. So it's up to infinity, but you cannot use negative 6. Now, just remember, absolute value inequalities are tricky. Just remember, when you do your second equation, do two things. Remember, second equation, two things. Switch the signs and make the answer negative. Do you have anything
Hey,
else to
look.
say about that? What?
Hey, look. I can do telekinesis.
Hey,
Da,
hey, hey, hey.
da,
Wait.
da, da,
You're a high school. You're not
da.
supposed to... No, no, no. Well, just let's get to the special... Let's just do special case inequalities.
Okay.
Now, special case inequalities. Negative 5x plus 5 is greater than 15. So special case inequalities is when you multiply or divide by a negative number. So negative 5 minus 5, like normal inverse operations. Now you get negative 5x is greater than 10. Here's the tricky part. When you're dividing by a negative 5 or multiply in an inequality situation, you have to flip the entire sign. So now it's x is less than negative 2. And graphing that would be paren negative infinity, comma, negative 2 paren. And that is how you do a special case inequality. Now you have learned all the equations, even the special case inequalities. Now, all you have to remember is that when you divide or multiply, you have to change the inequality sign, switch it around, and that is all. What a wonderful student he is. What? What was that? What was that? I thought you were a good student. How did you even learn to fly
I
anyways?
know.
Thank you for watching.
Telekinesis.
I forgot to tell you that to ask you any questions about interval notation. What are your questions?
I don't have any questions. I'm just bored out of my mind.